Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're going to tackle this piece called Texto Pagado, and it's got a kind of unique take on dating advice for men.
Oh, yeah.
It lays out 9 things men should avoid if they want to build self-respect and attract the right kind of partner, not just the typical be confident stuff.
It's definitely thought-provoking. What struck me is how it draws on, Stoic philosophy.
Okay, now hold on. I know some of our listeners might not be familiar with Stoicism.
Right.
Could you give us a quick rundown of what that even means?
Yeah, of course. So Stoicism is this ancient philosophy all about virtue and reason and living in accordance with nature. It's about focusing on what you can control, like your own thoughts and actions, rather than, external events or other people's opinions.
So Texto Pagado takes this self-control idea and applies it to dating.
Exactly. It encourages men to cultivate that inner strength and avoid seeking validation from outside sources, especially when it comes to dating.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's unpack these 9 don'ts and see what wisdom we can glean from them. The first one that caught my eye is don't beg for attention. Seems pretty straightforward, but what's the deeper meaning there, you think?
I think Texto Pagado is getting at the idea that desperation's a turnoff.
Right.
Constantly chasing after someone or trying too hard for their attention, it can actually make you seem less attractive.
So instead of showering someone with attention, the idea is to focus on your own life. Let your confidence shine through.
Precisely. It's about shifting that focus inward. Instead of seeking validation from someone else, you focus on building a fulfilling life that you're passionate about. Texto Pagado argues that kind of genuine self-assurance, that's what truly attracts others.
That makes a lot of sense. When you're happy and confident in yourself, you naturally radiate a certain energy that people pick up on.
Exactly. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, not for someone else, but for you. And ironically, that often makes you more appealing to others.
Okay, so don't beg for attention. It's all about building that inner confidence.
Yeah.
What's the next don't on the list?
The next one is don't be her therapist.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be supportive.
Right.
But Texto Pagado cautions against becoming someone's emotional dumping ground, especially early on in a relationship.
Yeah, I can see how constantly listening to someone's problems without having a balanced, enjoyable connection can be a slippery slope. Where do you draw the line between being supportive and becoming someone's therapist?
That's a great question, and I think it ties into the broader concept of emotional boundaries in relationships. Texto Pagado seems to suggest that it's important to assess whether the woman is seeking genuine companionship or simply using you as a sounding board for her problems.
So it's about recognizing those patterns and making sure the relationship is a two-way street.
Yes.
You're both sharing, you're both supporting each other, not just one person constantly unloading their baggage.
Exactly. And it's not about being cold or uncaring. You can be supportive without taking on the role of a therapist. It's about encouraging her to seek professional help if needed and ensuring that your interactions are balanced and enjoyable for both of you.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of inner confidence and setting healthy emotional boundaries.
Right.
What other pitfalls does Texto Pagado warn against?
The next one's a big one, and it might ruffle some feathers. Don't try to impress her with money.
The classic money can't buy you love argument.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, why does Texto Pagado see this as such a big no-no? Isn't it natural to want to treat someone you're interested in?
Of course, there's nothing wrong with being generous. But Texto Pagado suggests that trying to buy someone's affection with lavish gifts or constantly flaunting your wealth, it sends the wrong message.
It's like you're trying to compensate for something rather than letting your personality and character shine through.
Exactly. And it can also attract the wrong kind of partner, someone who's more interested in your money than in you as a person.
So instead of flashing the cash, the key is to build genuine connection and attraction based on shared values, interests, personality.
Absolutely. It's about focusing on building a genuine rapport rather than trying to create a shortcut with material possessions. Texto Pagado seems to be advocating for a more authentic approach to dating.
Okay, so no begging for attention, no becoming a therapist, and no trying to buy affection.
Right.
What's the next gem of wisdom from Texto Pagado?
The next one is about avoiding the trap of idealization. Don't put her on a pedestal.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. What's the harm in thinking highly of someone you're interested in? Isn't that part of the attraction?
It's natural to be drawn to someone's positive qualities, but Texto Pagado cautions against creating an idealized image of a woman and treating her like a goddess. It argues that this kind of idolization can actually hinder genuine connection.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that. How does putting someone on a pedestal get in the way of building a real relationship?
Well, for starters, it sets unrealistic expectations. When you put someone on a pedestal, you're not seeing them as a whole person flaws, and you're projecting your own fantasies onto them.
And when those fantasies inevitably clash with reality, it can lead to disappointment and disillusionment.
Exactly. And it can also create an imbalance in the relationship. The person on the pedestal might feel pressured to live up to this idealized image, while the person doing the idolizing might feel insecure and constantly afraid of losing this perfect partner.
So it's about treating someone with respect and admiration.
Yes.
But also recognizing that they're human, just like you, with their own strengths and weaknesses.
Precisely. Texto Pagado encourages men to see women as equals with their own unique complexities. It's about embracing the real person, not some idealized fantasy.
Okay, so we've covered 4 of the 9 don'ts.
Right.
Don't beg for attention, don't be her therapist, don't try to impress her with money, and don't put her on a pedestal. What's the next piece of advice Texto Pagado has for us?
It's a principle that applies not just to dating, but to all relationships. Don't tolerate disrespect.
That sounds like solid advice, but what does that look like in practice, especially in the context of dating? I mean, there's a difference between someone being playfully teasing and outright disrespect, right?
Absolutely. Texto Pagado isn't suggesting you become overly sensitive or react to every little comment. It's about recognizing when someone is crossing a line and communicating your boundaries clearly.
So if someone makes a comment that makes you feel uncomfortable, you address it directly, but calmly and respectfully.
Exactly. You might say something like, hey, that comment didn't sit well with me, or I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't talk to me like that. It's about asserting your self-respect without getting aggressive or defensive.
And if the person continues to disrespect your boundaries, that's a red flag, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a sign that they might not value you or your feelings. And in that case, Texto Pagado would probably suggest it's time to reconsider the relationship.
So it's about recognizing your worth and not settling for treatment that diminishes it. That's powerful.
It is. And it's a message that resonates beyond dating. Knowing your worth and setting healthy boundaries is essential in all relationships.
I love that. Okay, we've covered 5 don'ts so far, and I'm sensing a theme here. Self-respect seems to be a major thread running through Texto Pagado. What's the next don't on the list?
This one is particularly interesting, and it might challenge some conventional dating advice. Don't make her the center of your life.
Now, hold on a second. Isn't that what we're told to do? To show someone we care by making them a priority?
Yes, it's important to show someone they're important to you, but Texto Pagado cautions against losing yourself in the process. It argues that making someone the sole focus of your life can actually backfire.
Okay, I'm curious. How does that backfire?
Well, for one thing, it can create an unhealthy dynamic where one person becomes completely dependent on the other for their happiness and fulfillment. It can also make you less attractive because you lose that sense of individuality and purpose that drew the person to you in the first place.
So it's not about neglecting the relationship, but rather about maintaining a healthy balance between we and me.
Exactly. It's about ensuring that you have a fulfilling life outside of the relationship, pursuing your own passions, interests, and goals. This not only benefits you personally, but also makes you a more well-rounded and interesting partner.
You know, I can see how that ties back to the idea of self-respect that we talked about earlier. If you're constantly putting someone else's needs before your own, you're essentially saying that their needs are more important than yours.
That's a great point. And I think that's what Texto Pagado is getting at. It's about recognizing that you deserve to have your own life and your own pursuits, and a healthy relationship should allow space for both partners to thrive as individuals.
So don't make her the center of your life, but also don't neglect her. It's all about finding that delicate balance. What other advice does Texto Pagado have for navigating the complexities of dating?
This one is particularly important when you're starting to get to know someone. Don't try to convince her to be with you.
So it's about respecting someone's feelings and choices, even if they don't align with your desires.
Exactly. Texto Pagado seems to suggest that genuine attraction is organic. It can't be forced or manipulated. Trying to convince someone to be with you when they're not feeling it naturally is a recipe for disaster.
It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. You can force it, but it's not going to be a good fit, and someone's going to get hurt in the process.
That's a great analogy. And I think it highlights the importance of recognizing when someone isn't interested and accepting their decision gracefully.
So instead of wasting time and energy trying to change someone's mind, You focus on finding someone who's genuinely excited to be with you.
Exactly. And that ties back to the first we discussed, don't beg for attention. It's about valuing yourself and your time and not settling for someone who's not fully invested.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered 7 of the 9 don'ts from Texto Pagado. I'm eager to hear the last 2. What else does this piece encourage us to avoid?
This one might seem counterintuitive, especially in the context of a committed relationship. Don't neglect your personal growth.
I can see how that might seem strange. Once you're in a relationship, shouldn't the focus be on building that connection together? Why does Texto Pagado emphasize individual growth?
I think it goes back to the idea that a healthy relationship consists of 2 whole individuals who are constantly evolving and growing. Texto Pagado argues that neglecting your personal growth can lead to stagnation, both for you as an individual and for the relationship as a whole.
So it's not about becoming complacent once you're in a relationship, but rather about continuing to pursue your own interests, challenges, and goals.
Exactly. It's about staying curious, learning new things, expanding your horizons. This not only benefits you personally, but also brings a fresh perspective and energy to the relationship.
So it's almost like you're bringing new experiences and insights to the table, keeping the relationship dynamic and preventing it from falling into a rut.
Precisely. And it also prevents you from becoming too dependent on your partner for your sense of fulfillment. You have your own passions and pursuits that bring you joy and purpose, which in turn strengthens the foundation of the relationship.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, we've arrived at the final don't from Texto Pagado. Drumroll, please. What's the last piece of wisdom this piece offers?
It's a powerful message that resonates far beyond dating. Don't forget who you are.
That's a great one. But what does that mean in the context of dating and relationships?
I think it's about staying true to your values, your beliefs, and your authentic self. Texto Pagado seems to be saying that trying to change who you are to please someone else or fit into their mold is a recipe for unhappiness.
Because you're essentially building the relationship on a foundation of inauthenticity.
Exactly. And it's unsustainable in the long run. Sooner or later, the mask will slip and the resentment will build.
So it's about having the courage to be yourself, even if it means risking rejection. Because ultimately, you want to be with someone who loves you for who you truly are, not for some version of yourself that you've created to please them.
That's beautifully put. And I think that's the heart of Texto Pagado. It's about embracing authenticity and self-acceptance, not just in dating, but in all aspects of life.
Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of ground here. These 9 don'ts from Texto Pagado are definitely thought-provoking. But I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
What other insights can we glean from this piece, and how can we apply these principles to our own lives? We'll dive deeper into that after a quick word from our sponsor. Stay tuned. All right, we're back and ready to delve a little deeper into Texto Pagado and its unique perspective on dating.
You know, as we've been discussing these 9 don'ts, I keep coming back to this idea that Texto Pagado isn't just offering like surface level dating tips.
Right.
It's promoting a whole philosophy.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about it, right? It's not just a list of rules to follow. There's real depth to the advice.
Exactly. And that depth comes from those Stoic principles woven throughout the piece. Remember, Stoicism emphasizes focusing on what you can control. So much of dating feels outside of our control. You know, like whether someone likes us back or not.
Right.
But Texto Pagado, it kind of flips that on its head.
So instead of trying to control the outcome, you focus on controlling yourself, your actions, your reactions.
Precisely. By becoming more self-aware, building our confidence, pursuing our passions, we become more attractive without even directly trying to.
It's that whole what you seek is seeking you concept, right? The more you focus on your own growth and happiness, the more you attract people who are on a similar wavelength.
Exactly. And Texto Pagado takes it a step further. It argues that when we're secure in ourselves, we're less likely to fall into those traps of like seeking validation or putting someone on a pedestal.
Because we already have that validation within ourselves.
Yes.
We don't need it from someone else.
Exactly. And that self-respect radiates outward. It sets the standard for how others treat us.
Which brings us back to that point about not becoming someone's therapist.
Right.
We talked about setting healthy boundaries, but I think there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not just about protecting ourselves from being overwhelmed by someone else's problems. It's also about recognizing that we can't like fix someone else. We can't control their emotions or healing process.
So true support comes from a place of strength, not from a need to be a savior or a rescuer.
Exactly. It's about empowering someone to navigate their own challenges while offering a listening ear and genuine support.
It's like that saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime.
I love that analogy, and I think it applies perfectly here. By encouraging someone's independence and resilience, we're offering a much deeper form of support than just trying to solve their problems for them.
We talked earlier about the importance of authenticity.
Right.
And I think that's another key theme in Texto Pagado. It explicitly says not to try to convince someone to be with you.
Right. It recognizes that genuine attraction can't be manufactured or manipulated. It has to flow naturally.
Which, makes total sense when you think about it. You can't force someone to like you.
Right.
It's either there or it isn't.
Exactly. And the more we try to control those things, the more frustrated we're likely to become. Texto Pagado encourages us to focus on showing up as our truest selves and letting the chips fall where they may.
So instead of playing games or trying to be someone you're not, you just put your authentic self out there and trust that the right people will be drawn to you.
Precisely. And that level of self-assurance is incredibly attractive.
Now, one of the don'ts that really resonated with me was the one about not making a woman the center of your life. I think a lot of people might misunderstand that advice.
I agree. It's not about neglecting the relationship or being emotionally distant. It's about recognizing that a healthy relationship consists of two whole individuals, each with their own passions and interests.
It's about maintaining a balance between we and me, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think Texto Pagado would argue that when we lose sight of our individuality, we actually become less attractive to our partners.
Because we become less interesting, less dynamic?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And we might unintentionally create a dynamic where our partner feels pressured to fulfill all of our needs.
Which is a recipe for resentment and codependency.
Right. So it's not just about protecting our own individuality. It's also about respecting our partner's need for space and autonomy.
This reminds me of that other don't neglect your personal growth. Those two seem to go hand in hand.
Absolutely. When we continue to grow and evolve as individuals, we bring that vitality into our relationships.
It's like keeping the spark alive by continuously learning, exploring, and expanding our horizons.
Exactly. And that personal growth can encompass so many things. It could be pursuing a new hobby, learning a new skill, taking a class, traveling, or simply spending time in self-reflection.
You know what's fascinating about all of these points from Texto Pagado is that they're not just applicable to dating.
Right.
They're life lessons.
Absolutely. They're about cultivating self-awareness, self-respect, authenticity, and a commitment to personal growth. Those are qualities that will serve you well in all aspects of life, not just romantic relationships.
I couldn't agree more. So listener, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, take a moment to reflect on these principles and how they might resonate with your own experiences. Are there areas where you might be neglecting your own needs or setting boundaries? Are you showing up authentically in your relationships?
These are powerful questions to consider.
And remember, the journey to finding fulfilling relationships starts with cultivating a strong sense of self. But that doesn't mean this journey has to be a solo one. Sometimes we need a little guidance and support.
That's where the wisdom of sources like Texto Pagado can be so valuable.
We'll be right back after a short break to explore some real-life scenarios and see how these principles can be applied in practical ways. Stay with us. Okay, we're back and ready to get down to the nitty-gritty. We've talked about the philosophy behind Texto Pagado and its 9 don'ts for men in dating. But how do you actually put this wisdom into practice?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one thing to understand these principles in theory, but how do they play out in real life?
Exactly. So let's say you're interested in someone and you put yourself out there, but they're just not reciprocating that interest. What would Texto Pagado say about how to handle that situation?
Oh, remember the point about not begging for attention.
Right.
Texto Pagado would say, you need to recognize you can't control someone else's feelings. You can't force someone to like you back. Instead of trying to convince them to change their mind, accept their choice, and move on with grace.
It's tough though, right? It's hard not to take it personally when you're rejected, especially if you've put yourself out there.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah.
But remember, this isn't about suppressing your feelings or pretending you don't care. It's about channeling your energy in a more positive and productive direction.
So what does that look like? How do you move on gracefully?
Well, instead of dwelling on the rejection and fixating on this one person, focus on yourself. Dive back into your hobbies, reconnect with friends, invest in your personal growth. Texto Pagado would say that the more fulfilling your life is outside of dating, the more attractive you'll become.
Because you're radiating confidence and self-assurance. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And that kind of genuine self-love is magnetic. Who knows? Maybe that confidence will catch the eye of someone new. Or maybe it'll help you realize that you're perfectly happy and fulfilled on your own.
That's such an important point. Sometimes we get so caught up in finding a partner that we forget to appreciate our own company and the amazing life we're already building for ourselves.
Exactly. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about another common dating scenario.
Yeah.
Dealing with disrespect. Let's say you're on a date and the person makes a rude or offensive comment, or maybe they cross a boundary that makes you feel uncomfortable. How would Texto Pagado advise you to handle that?
That's a tricky one because on the one hand, you don't want to overreact, but on the other hand, you don't want to let someone walk all over you.
Right. You need to find that balance. Texto Pagado emphasizes the importance of not tolerating disrespect. So in that situation, it would encourage you to address the issue directly, but calmly and assertively.
It's about standing up for yourself without letting it escalate into a fight.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might simply say something like, I don't appreciate that kind of language, or that comment made me feel uncomfortable. It's not about attacking them or making them feel bad. It's about communicating your boundaries clearly and respectfully.
And if they apologize and respect your boundary, great. But if they continue to disrespect you,
then Texto Pagado would say, it's time to reconsider the relationship. It's about recognizing your worth and not settling for treatment that diminishes it.
you teach people how to treat you. And if someone consistently disrespects you, it might be a sign that they're not the right person for you.
Exactly. And this principle applies to all relationships, not just romantic ones.
Right.
Setting boundaries and standing up for yourself is crucial in any dynamic.
All right, one final scenario. Let's say you're in a relationship and it's going well, but you start to feel like you're losing yourself a bit. You've given up your hobbies, your friends. You've stopped doing the things that used to bring you joy. What would Texto Pagado say about that?
Well, remember the point about not making her the center of your life.
Yeah.
Texto Pagado would say, you need to reclaim your individuality. It's not selfish to want to have your own life outside of the relationship. In fact, it's essential for a healthy and sustainable partnership.
Because when you're happy and fulfilled as an individual, you bring that positive energy into the relationship.
Precisely. But when you neglect your own needs and lose sight of who you are, you can become resentful. And that resentment can poison the relationship.
It's about finding that balance again between we and me.
Exactly. It's about having open communication with your partner about your needs and making sure you're both getting what you need from the relationship.
It's like that oxygen mask analogy they give you on airplanes, right? You have to put your own mask on first before you can help anyone else.
I love that analogy. And I think it applies perfectly to relationships. You have to take care of your own well-being and happiness before you can truly show up for someone else.
So listener, as we wrap up this deep dive into Texto Pagado, I want to leave you with this thought. You have the power to create the relationships you desire. It starts with cultivating self-awareness, self-respect, and authenticity.
And remember, it's an ongoing journey. We're all constantly learning and growing.
So be kind to yourself, embrace the process, and never stop exploring what it means to be your most authentic and empowered self.
And never be afraid to seek out resources and support when you need them.
That's right. We're all in this together. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Texto Pagado. Until next time, keep diving deep.